all the soldiers walk back to Belarus because they also forgot food. That underlined for NATO that Russia has forgotten how to fight a war, not just from the Soviet times, but from the Tsarist times. They're relearning how to do everything from scratch. That's fact one. Fact two, the Russians feel that they cannot be physically secure unless they can block the territories that allow access to the heartland. They're facing a demographic collapse. They know if they don't expand militarily now, they won't be able to in the future. And those access points that they need, Ukraine isn't one of them. Ukraine is in the unfortunate position on being on the way to two of them. So from the Russian point of view, Ukraine is just a step. And when they are done with Ukraine, if they are successful, they will come for Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Bulgaria, and Romania, excuse me, NATO countries. So we know, if they win, that the next fight will be with us. But they don't know how to fight a conventional war any longer. So the defense estimates that I have seen suggest 1,000 to 1 casualty ratios. They're doing worse than worse than the Iraqis did in '92. But they see this as a fight for their existential survival, and they are right. So there will be a nuclear exchange. Just to underline that, if Ukraine loses, we will lose cities. And so the opportunity cost here, to put it in your parlance, wow. Never before has there been an opportunity to leverage so little to get so much. Whether or not Ukraine can win, we're going to find out this year. It's been mud season. The Ukrainians can't fight a war of attrition. They don't have the numbers. They have to find a way to get a strategic advantage that allows them to go from the 2 to 3 to casualty ratio, 2 to 3 to 1, to something closer to 8 to 10. That's the only way Ukraine wins. They can't do that when they can't move, and the mud season has prevented them from moving. By the time we get to May, mud season will be over. We will probably have these main battle tanks in place, but for every battle tank that the West has committed to this point, the Russians are going to have another 5,000 men on the front. It's a classic Sparta versus Athens, and by the time we get to June, we were going to know which of those two strategies is going to be more successful. And then we will know who will win. We won't know when yet. I'm sorry, that summer vacation is probably not going to happen. You're going to be busy.
I booked my flight.
Yeah.
You're going to find a way. Well, it's amusing, if a little depressing, to hear the kind of risk reward. I love that you're putting it in that parlance. Can you, I mean, both of you think a lot about what this means for investors, for kind of the entire global supply chains and all of these industries that depend on it. So can you talk a little bit, Daniel, we'll start with you, with how investors should think about this, what the ripple effects are that investors should be thinking about?
Yeah, this is, I'm probably not going to say super popular things. Maybe I will, I don't know.
Just useful, doesn't have to be popular.
The conversations generally about Ukraine are actually conversations about Russia. Because nobody knows much about Ukraine. Nobody studied it, nobody was really interested, except for policy wonks. But I think that Ukraine right now is at the epicenter of global change. And we used to talk about the reforms that needed to take place in order to build a European Ukraine. I'm actually thinking now about a Ukrainian Europe. Because if Ukraine, which I never expected to have candidate member status, I never expected to see that in my lifetime, but now that's a reality and we're going to have to push that. We are also right now de facto a NATO member. We are the eastern shield of NATO. So, people saying, like Spain or Germany saying, well, we can't give you our tanks because we need them to protect our eastern border. Look at a map, okay? So I think that this is really important because when Ukraine joins the EU, the center of gravity of the EU is going to change. You're going to have a Polish-Ukrainian axis, and that's going to have profound political implications, but it's also going to have profound economic implications because we're already integrated to a very large extent. I was, for 3 years, the head of Ukraine Invest, which was the Ukrainian government's foreign investment promotion agency, and there was no bigger thankless job in the Ukrainian government from 1916 to 2019. I couldn't even get a conversation with most investors because they couldn't find Ukraine on a map of Ukraine. I think that problem's solved. On the other hand, we had, since we signed the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, we had already integrated to such a large extent. We were already part of the European supply chain. But this is going to have global implications as well, because we're now going to, in my view, we're seeing the start of a bipolar world, where you're going to have the axis of evil, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. India, Brazil, and Indonesia are going to have to figure out which way they're going to go. And then you have the democracies. And this is really, I think, what Ukraine has done I hope, for a lot of Western democracies is reminded everybody how important principles are. There is a cost to doing business with tyrants and autocrats. And that's something that business and financial sector people need to understand. Your supply chains, a lot of your investment strategies you're going to toss the manual, because they're going to change. We're going to have new energy. I used to wonder, what are we going to do with all the Soviet-era energy infrastructure? Well, Vladimir Putin took care of that. So we've now got to go back. We're not going to rebuild these huge power plants. We're going to go to green energy. We're going to go to something that's more local, more mobile. That's going to have an impact on Europe, because we're going to be the big experimental laboratory of how you rebuild a country of 40 million people from scratch. And this is going to have global implications as well. And you're going to either be part of the China-Russia axis or part of the American-led international democratic axis. And that's maybe too stark a point, but I think that it bears thinking. I mean, the EU especially has been Putin's enabler for the last 10 years. We've been at war with Putin for 9 years now, since he invaded the Donbass. This is just the next iteration. During that time, the EU doubled down, especially Germany, doubled down on doing business with them, building Nord Stream 2, becoming more dependent on Russia than less dependent. All of that's gone out the window now. And I don't think, Peter knows much more about this than I do, but I don't see how you go back to doing business with an aggressive, terrorist, genocidal empire on your doorstep. And is that what you really want? So we may actually see what I call euphemistically the decolonization of Russia. If they are defeated in Ukraine, and they must be defeated in Ukraine, if there's ever going to be peace in Europe, and if they are defeated, that will create certain events inside Russia. Let's not get ourselves bent out of shape about, oh my God, we can't do that because somebody else is going to come into power. Guess what? You don't control anything that happens inside Russia, and we never have. And having we need to accept the fact that Russia may actually break apart. And we have to manage that process in a way that we take advantage of it as democracies, because our principles and our matter, they are the lifeblood of our societies.
I agree with the local picture. I don't agree with the global picture. So
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. For Ukraine to win, Russia doesn't just have to lose its military capacity in Ukraine. It has to lose its military capacity to project power at all. And that will lead to a political shift and maybe even a regime collapse within the Russian system. But even before we get there, how can I put this most clearly? Halliburton took a moral stance on the war. Anyone who wants to put money in or do business with Russia has to consider that you are now in an ethical bucket that is closer to Attila the Hun than Halliburton. You want to talk reputational risk? You want to look under the hood and look at rule of law. You want to look at corruption. You want to look at efficiency. But you've got to make it clear that you're going to go places that Nazi Germany didn't. That's what you're going to be a part of if you want to play in that